home page, DatePicker, result page. These are the parts of our simple age calculator which we will be building in this video. So I'm opening Android Studio and creating a new project by selecting empty activity. Now you need to fill in these details. If you make any mistakes, don't worry, they can be changed even after the project is created. When you create a YouTube channel or an account on X, you get something called handle. That handle must be unique. And in Android, the package name is like your app's handle. If it's not unique, it could overlap with other apps. If you try to install two apps with the same package name, the older one will be replaced by the new one. Then select the minimum SDK version. I'm going with Android 8. So this app won't be supported below Android 8, okay? So it will be easier to maintain the project since I'm not targeting the older versions. Finally, click the finish button and get ready to wait. It's just getting things ready for you. And this process is called Gradle build. The first build usually takes a while, but it's not the first build for me. So it's finished in a minute or two, which means now we can start coding. By default, an activity called main activity is created. This activity is linked to the root, which is the Android manifest.xml. The manifest can be seen as the root because it holds the app icon, name, permission, etc. along with the activities. An activity means a screen, such as the login screen, main screen, settings screen, etc. All screens are called activities. For now, we have main activity, where we will be coding the age calculator. In the activity, you see a hello world text. If you run into this problem, go to build.gradle and change the target SDK version and compile SDK version to 35. Let's remove this as we are not gonna show hello world. So if you want to display something, we need to add that component here in the set content method. This is the theme created by Android Studio. You can even create a custom theme, but I'm happy with this one. Before we design the UI, let's take a look at some components of Jetpack Compose. For now, let's talk about column, row and box. I'm adding 3 text components on the screen. But they are not aligned the way I expected, but I want them to arrange vertically one after the other. To do that, we need to use a column. We will make the column fill the maximum size of the screen. Then add the text components inside. But let's also arrange them in the center vertically using vertical arrangement. And align them horizontally using horizontal alignment. But if you want to place the texts at the top, center and bottom one after the other, then box would be more suitable. If I want to place this text horizontally, one by one, I need to use a row. We can also center the items inside it, just like before. I'm adding some padding so that these don't feel overlapping. Let's build and test it out. On your Android device, go to About Phone and tap on the build number or version number 8 times repeatedly. This will unlock the developer options. Then just enable USB debugging and connect your device to your PC using a USB cable. Now click on the debug button and the app will be installed on your device. This process is called debugging. This is a debug version meant for developers to find and fix bugs, not the final version, okay? Building an app like this requires a lot of components, but as you can see, adding these components directly inside the setContent method makes the code harder to read and feels less organized. That's why we need to follow the principles of clean coding. So we can create a composable function and use it as a single component. Add these components inside the function and call it in the setContent method. Another approach commonly used among developers is to create a new Kotlin file and declare a composable function. If you don't remove this, it will be treated as a class rather than a file, so be careful. You can pass this modifier from the activity if you want to. For designing this calculator page, I'm gonna use these colors. You can find many colors with a Google search and then use this eyedropper tool to copy the color code. Now navigate to the UI package, open the color.kt file and add the color codes you have copied. Remove the hashtag and replace it with 0xff. Now I'm removing the text composable I added earlier as a quick example. Let's create a Kotlin class, remove these codes and treat it as a Kotlin file. This function will be the main composable for the home page, so there's no need to pass the modifier as a parameter. Use a box as the layout and fill max size, so it covers the entire screen. I wanna see the preview, so add this annotation and it will appear in the preview section here. In this layout, set the background color that we have declared in the colors file. Inside this layout, I'm adding a title that will be at the top. For the first preview, we need to build the project to see it. It's kind of like refreshing a browser page. So I can see the black screen, which is actually the box, and black is its color. By default, the text color is black, so it's hard to see. So let's change the text color to white. Now we might be wondering, where's the white color coming from? We didn't declare it, right? Well, Android Studio provides these colors as gifts, and you can find them inside the color class. I'd like to add a line break using the skip sequence \n. After this, let's align it to top center and add 100 dp of padding. For the perfect size, I'm applying a material style to it. Then I'm choosing sans serif as the font family. It's another gift provided by Android Studio. To make it thinner, I'm using font weight light. Now let's add another composable, and this time we will use the modifier as a parameter. Since this composable represents the body section, creating it separately makes the code more readable and easier to manage. Then add this one to the main composable of our home page and align it to the center. This time add a column with fill max width and set a background color to it. For the text inside, use the color we have declared earlier. To make all the text uppercase, use dot uppercase and align it horizontally to the center. You can copy and paste the attributes from the previous one since we want the same style. To add more space, place a spacer at the top. And now add a spacer at the bottom as well. I want more space inside the main composable, so I'm adding padding. Adding 12 dB of padding has pushed this composable inward from the borders. But the edges of this layout seems too sharp. It might hurt our fingers if we touch it. So let's smooth out those edges. Simply use clip with rounded corner shape and make sure to place it above the background, otherwise it won't work. Let's add a short description here so it doesn't feel empty. For a good description, we will take some help from ChatGPT. Now copy it and paste it in. Since it's a long text, it's taking up a lot of space, so let's create a variable for this text and use that in our composable instead. Add a color for the text, but the text is colliding with the borders. So I'll add some paddings here. Next, change the font size. If you want, you can use a custom font size like this, but I prefer using a predefined style instead. After adding this, I'm creating another composable which will be the DatePicker button. This composable will be aligned right here. Add a row and set its background color. Then add a text to it. Initially, I'm just showing the date format so users don't get confused after selecting the date. The text color will be white, styled with body medium, and have 18 dB of padding. Now let's make the row rounded. It looks nice, right? After this text, I'm adding an icon. To get icons, open your favorite browser and search for material icons. From this website, download an icon and place it inside the drawable folder. If there's an error, no worries, just remove the problematic line. Next, I'm adding an image using Painter resource. Don't forget to set the content description. You can write anything you like. The image isn't aligned properly, so I'm setting the vertical alignment to center vertically. To make it look better, I'm adding a bit of space after this image with a spacer set to 18 dp, which matches the padding value of this text. In this body section, I want to add more space around. So let's add padding to the column. Now you might get confused because earlier I placed the padding below the background and this time I'm placing it above the clip. If you place padding above both the clip and the background will also maintain some space along with the child components. However, if you add padding below the background, only the child components will have the space and the background won't be affected. Finally, let's create another composable for the next button, aka calculate button, and use the modifier as a parameter. Inside this composable, use a button, and this is the on-click callback where we can observe the button clicks. Next, download an icon for it and paste it in the drawable folder. Now I'm going to use the icon inside this button with Painter resource and a content description. The button is at the top of the screen because we didn't use the modifier passed from the box. Now let's add colors. Content color means the color of the components inside the button, which in my case is just the icon. Container color is the background color of the button. Disabled colors represents the colors you want to use when the button is in a disabled state. I know I should have named these colors more wisely, but I didn't, so never mind. Let's add padding to the button composable. So our calculator page is almost ready. Wait, why is the screen empty? Oh, I forgot to set the main composable in the set content method. It looks nice, but if I click on the DatePicker button, there's no click effect. To fix this, add clickable, set up an interaction source, and use indication, remember ripple. And there goes our on-click callback. Now it's showing the ripple effect. For showing a date picker, we can use DatePicker dialog. The first parameter is the context, so create a context variable and set its value to localContext.current. Android provides a device default dialog theme, which gives our date picker a modern look. The third parameter is the listener. For now, let's set it to null. Next are the default year, month, and day values. These determine the date that appears when the date picker is opened for the first time. In the month section, I used 11, which represents December because months in the date picker start from 0. finally call the show function on the dialog to display it. I have chosen February 7, but if I open it again, it's showing the default date. That's because every time I click the button, a new DatePicker dialog is created. This not only resets the date, but can also impact performance. So what will I do is simple. Pass a callback from the composable to the body composable, then from the body composable pass it to the main composable, and from there it will be passed to the main activity. Open main activity and add a DatePicker dialog. This time, use curly braces for the listener. The first parameter is the DatePicker, which we don't need, and the rest are the year, month, and day. To store the selected date, let's add a state with a default value. I know the state management might be new to you, so let's break it down with a few examples. Let's say I have a text component here and I want to increase the text count whenever a button is clicked, but we can't change the text directly with the button. So we need to use state for that. Think of the state as an API or controller. When the value in the state changes, the composable will automatically recompose and display the updated value. So by just changing the state, we are essentially triggering a recomposition, which redraws the text with the new value. We use remember to wrap the mutable state, so the state value doesn't get lost during the recomposition and we keep the value intact. Let's look at another example. Here I have a state for a loading screen. If the value is false, the progress bar will show, but if it's true, it will display the text. When the button is clicked, it sets the state value to true and triggers a recomposition. The screen redraws with the updated value and the text is shown instead of the progress bar. This process of redrawing the UI with the new state is called recomposition. Update the state value inside the listener. It needs to be a var because val cannot be changed. For formatting the date, first add the day parameter followed by a hyphen. Next include the month parameter since months start from 0. Finally, after another hyphen, append the year. For the default values, I want to use the current date from the device. So let's create a function that takes a parameter and use it with the type parameter. Now set the state to the parameter, receive the click listener and show the date picker. You can also define the date picker as a class level property. For that, we need to create another variable to store the date picker. And then, whenever the date picker is removed, hidden or dismissed, update the state according to the value of the date text variable. App crashed. Why? Because when we add the date picker outside the onCreate method, it gets created before the activity is fully initialized. To fix this, we can wrap it in by lazy. What this do is delay the creation of the date picker until the object is actually used for the first time. In this case, we are calling the date picker for the first time in the onCreate method. So it will only be created once the activity is fully initialized. Again, create a new class, remove these codes and just copy paste the code from home. Now it's time to rename the functions, but instead of renaming them directly, press Shift plus F6. This will update the function names wherever they are used. I thought it would only change the names in this file, but it also updated them in the main activity, even though I clicked cancel. And this time it even modified the code in the home file. We don't need any buttons on this page, so just remove them. The title also needs to be changed. If you notice any rendering issues like this, just build the project and the preview will display correctly. After changing the texts, let's use a column. Inside it, add some text composables. Then just update the text values. And with that, the result page is complete. Open the build.gradle file and add the compose navigation dependency. If you type navigation comp, you will see the suggestion pop up, or you can trigger the suggestion manually with Ctrl plus space. Now, why do we need navigation? Well, it's used to switch between composables displayed on the screen. But could not we do this simply with state? Yes, we could. However, when it comes to advanced features like deep linking, animation, or managing complex backstacks, navigation is a great choice. So let's get into this. Let's add a nav host, which will serve as the container for all the composables in your navigation flow. To make navigation work, it requires a nav controller, which acts as a state component. This allows you to switch between composables. The start destination defines the default composable to be shown when the app is started for the first time. For now, we will leave it empty. Next, let's define two composables, each with root name. This helps identify them in the navigation graph. The app crashes because we haven't set the start destination yet. In the button composable, add a click handler parameter and trigger it when the button is clicked. Then, in the main composable, create another click handler and trigger it when the button's click handler is called. After that, use it in main activity to listen for the button click. Finally, navigate to the result page when the button is clicked. By default, it has the fade transition, which I'm not a big fan of. So let's add an enter transition using slide in horizontally. Oh, I made a syntax mistake. I set the initial offset to the default value. Now let's add the exit transition using slide out horizontally. The target offset will also be the default, but this time I'll use -8 to slide the screen out in the opposite direction. Now we need to set the pop enter transition and the pop exit transition. I think this concept might be still unclear, so let me explain. When you navigate from composable A to B, A performs the exit transition and B performs the enter transition. That's why the exit transition uses a negative value to move the screen in the opposite direction. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is pop? Well, when you go back to the previous composable, that's called pop. In the pop transition, the default direction is reversed, meaning it by default holds a negative value. So we need to add a negative sign to the enter transition to ensure it moves in the straight direction. Navigation handles the back button by default, but if we were using state to switch between composables, we would have to manually handle back button behavior. In the root, add a slash. Then enclose the argument name inside curly braces. Use this argument in the dateText parameter. And when navigating to the result page, pass the dateText as an argument. This is how we pass data when navigating between composables. We don't need any click handler here, so let's remove it. Now let's get into the calculation. First, create a function that takes date of birth as a parameter and returns a list of strings. Inside the function, start by checking if the date of birth is blank. If it is, just return an empty list and skip the rest of the code. Now convert the date of birth into a date object. Use the simple date format class with the pattern ddmmyy because the date of birth is in this format. Remember, use uppercase mm for months because lowercase mm means minutes. Set the second parameter to local.getDefault. to match the device locale. Call the pers method and pass the date of birth to get the date object. If it fails, return an empty list and the rest of the code will be skipped. Next, create a val to store the current time using system.getCurrentTime_millis. This captures the current date and time from your device and returns the time in milliseconds since January 1, 1970, commonly known as Unix timestamp. Then calculate the time difference between the Unix timestamp of the date of birth and the current timestamp. To calculate the errors, start by converting the total milliseconds into days, then divide by 365. This gives the total number of errors. Next, for the months, convert the milliseconds into days and divide by 30 to get the total months. However, since we want only the months left after accounting for full years, let's take the remainder when dividing the total months by 12. This remainder represents the leftover months after completing the full years. Similarly, for the days, we take the total number of days and calculate the remainder when divided by 30. This gives the leftover days after accounting for the full months. For the hours, minutes and seconds, I followed the same logic. This approach, however, isn't fully accurate because it assumes every month has 30 days and doesn't account for leap years. But for the sake of simplicity and to keep things beginner friendly, I chose this method so you don't feel overwhelmed with unnecessary complexity. Finally, the function will return the years, months, days, hours and seconds as a list. Remember, first item is at index 0. Now let's call the function. If it returns an empty list, we will simply stop here. I think this should be managed as a state. Update the title with the years from the state, where the 0 index refers to the first item in the list. I have added a line break for better readability. In the body composable, pass the list. Then update the text fields based on the values. But I'd like to keep the button disabled until a date is selected using the DatePicker. To do this, add a date parameter for the date text in the button composable. Then in the enabled property, set the condition to check if the date text is not equal to the default text, which is DDMMYY, when no date is selected. This way the button will only be enabled once a valid date is picked. Now pass the date text to the button composable as a parameter. The button is disabled by default and selecting a date will enable it. However, there's a bug where the button gets enabled even if you cancel the date selection. To fix this, open the main activity and add an if statement. Check if the selected text in the DatePicker is empty. If it is, set the state text to the default text. If not, update the state with the selected text. With this fix, the calculator should work as expected. And it's complete. If you are still watching, then you are really a passionate developer.